Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
3 years. That's how long I'd been with Larry when everything started falling apart. Or maybe it had been falling apart all along, and I was just too tired to notice. You have to understand, I was good at being tired. I perfected it, really. The kind of bone-deep exhaustion that makes you grateful for small mercies, like when he didn't yell about dinner being 5 minutes late, or when he actually showed up to my yoga classes instead of spending the evening at whatever business meeting he claimed to have. I taught yoga then. Still do, actually, but it's different now. Back then, my voice would get this artificially bright quality during class, like I was performing happiness instead of feeling it. Breathe into your heart space, I tell my students, while my own heart felt like it was wrapped in barbed wire. Find your center, I'd say, when I couldn't even remember what mine looked like. The apartment we shared, his apartment, really. Though I paid half the rent, always smelled like stale beer and broken promises. The walls were thin enough that I could hear Mrs. Chen next door arguing with her daughter about money, about choices, about all the things I was too scared to argue about myself. Larry had this way of making every conversation feel like a negotiation I was already losing. "You're too sensitive, Quinn," he'd say whenever I tried to bring up anything that mattered. "You overthink everything. That's your problem." And I'd nod, because it was easier than fighting. Easier than admitting that maybe the problem wasn't my thinking, maybe the problem was that I'd stopped thinking altogether. The day I found that bank statement, I'd been cleaning out my purse, looking for my studio keys. Larry had this habit of borrowing my car without asking, and somehow my spare keys always ended up in his pocket. I was digging through receipts and old lip balm tubes when my fingers found the folded paper, and something about the way it felt too official, too heavy, made my stomach drop before I even opened it. $28,000. My inheritance. From my grandmother, the money I'd been saving for a real yoga studio, for a life that felt like mine, gone, transferred out in increments over the past 6 months. Each withdrawal had Larry's signature on it, because of course I'd added him to the account. Because that's what girlfriends do, right? Trust their partners with everything. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor. It was the only room in the apartment with a lock, staring at that statement until the numbers blurred together. I wasn't crying yet. I was past crying. I was in that strange, hollow space between heartbreak and rage, where you feel like you're watching your life happen to someone else. That's when I heard the pounding on the front door. "Larry, Larry, you piece of shit, open up." The voice was rough, angry, punctuated by fists that sounded like they could break the door down. "We know you're in there." I pressed my ear to the bathroom door, my heart hammering. Larry's voice from the living room was higher than usual, nervous. "Look, Tony, I told you. You told me a lot of things, asshole. You told me the horses were a sure thing. You told me you had the money. You told me a lot of fucking lies." The conversation devolved into threats I won't repeat, but the message was clear. Larry owed people money. A lot of money. My money, apparently. And these weren't the kind of people who accepted payment plans. After they left, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Larry found me in the bathroom. He didn't apologize, he didn't explain. He just looked at me with this expression I'd never seen before, like he was calculating something. "It's not as bad as it sounds," he said finally. "I've got a big deal coming through next week. I'll pay it all back. My grandmother's money, Larry. That was supposed to be for my studio." "Our studio," he corrected, and the way he said it made my skin crawl. "We're a team, remember? What's yours is mine, what's mine is yours. Except nothing was ever mine. Not really." Not the apartment, not the car, not even my own dreams. Somehow, over 3 years, I'd become a tenant in my own life. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there listening to Larry's snoring, watching the ceiling fan turn lazy circles overhead, and I made a decision. Maybe not the right decision, maybe. Not a brave decision, but a decision nonetheless. I was going to the vintage store the next morning. Not to buy anything, I couldn't afford to buy anything anymore, but just to be somewhere that felt like mine. The Dusty Rose Vintage wasn't much to look at from the outside. Peeling paint, a neon sign that flickered between open and open, windows that looked like they hadn't been cleaned since the Carter administration, but inside was magic. Racks of clothes that told stories, furniture that had lived. Full lives, books with margins full of someone else's thoughts. It was the kind of place where you could get lost for hours and come out feeling like you'd found something important, even if you weren't sure what. I'd been going there for months, always on Tuesdays when Larry had his standing poker game. It was my secret refuge, my tiny rebellion. The owner, Mrs. Rose, was probably in her 70s and had this way of looking at you like she could see straight through to your bones. She never asked questions, never made small talk, just let me wander through her maze of memories in peace. That particular Tuesday, the Tuesday after the bank statement, I was examining a lamp that was truly, objectively hideous. Brass base shaped like a swan, lampshade covered in what appeared to be a sunset painted by someone who'd never actually seen one. It was the kind of thing that should have made me laugh, but instead, I found myself crying. Not pretty crying. Not the kind of crying you see in movies where a single tear rolls down a perfectly made-up cheek. This was ugly crying, the kind that comes from somewhere so deep you didn't even know it existed. Snot and tears and these horrible gasping sounds that I couldn't control. That bad, huh? The voice startled me. I spun around, trying to wipe my face with the back of my hand, and there she was, Autumn, though I didn't know her name yet. Didn't know anything about her, except that she had the kindest eyes I'd ever seen, and she wasn't looking at me like I was crazy for sobbing over a lamp. She was probably my age, maybe a year or two younger, with dark hair that looked like she'd just run her fingers through it and close that. Somehow managed to look effortless and intentional at the same time. Vintage band t-shirt, jeans with holes that might have been authentic wear rather than factory distressed, boots that had clearly walked a lot of miles. "I'm sorry," I managed, my voice coming out all scratchy and broken. "I don't know why this is embarrassing." "Don't apologize," she said, and her voice had this quality that made me want to keep listening. "That lamp is genuinely offensive. Crying is probably the only appropriate response." Despite everything, I laughed. Just a little hiccup of a laugh, but it was the first genuine sound I'd made in weeks. "I'm Autumn," she said, extending a hand that was warm and calloused in a way that suggested she actually used it for things. "Quinn." Her handshake was firm, confident. The kind of handshake that meant business. "So, Quinn who cries at ugly lamps, what's your story?" It was such a direct question, so different from Larry's constant deflections and non-answers, that I didn't know how to respond at first. When was the last time someone had asked me about my story? When was the last time I thought I had one? Worth telling? "I don't know," I said finally, and it was the most honest thing I'd said in months. "I think I forgot." Something shifted in her expression then. Not pity, I would have run if it had been pity, but recognition. Like she knew exactly what it felt like to lose track of your own narrative. "Well," she said, glancing at the hideous lamp, "maybe we should start with what you're not crying about. Because I'm pretty sure it's not actually the lamp." And that's how it started. Not with fireworks or love at first sight or any of the things they tell you about in movies. It started with a stranger who saw me falling apart in a thrift store and didn't look away. It started with someone who asked about my story and then actually waited to hear the answer. We ended up sitting on Mrs. Rose's ancient velvet couch, the one she kept in the back corner next to the jewelry case, and I found myself telling Autumn things I'd never told anyone. About Larry and the money and the way I'd somehow become a ghost in my own life. About how I used to have dreams and plans, and now I could barely remember what they were. She listened without trying to fix me, without offering advice or solutions or any of the things people usually say when someone falls apart in front of them. She just listened, and when I was done talking, she said, "That sounds really hard." Such simple words, but they hit me like a physical thing. When was the last time someone had acknowledged that my life was hard? Larry was always telling me how easy I had it, how I didn't know what real problems look like. But Autumn just sat there and saw me, saw the weight I'd been carrying, and said it was hard. I should go, I said eventually, because sitting there with her felt too good and I didn't trust good things anymore. "Should you?" she asked, and there was something in the way she said it that made me pause. "I have to make dinner. Larry gets cranky if dinner's not ready when he gets home from poker." "What time is it now?" I checked my phone. 3:30. "And what time does Larry get home?" "Around 7, usually." "So you have 3.5 hours to make dinner, and you're leaving now because—" I opened my mouth to explain about shopping and prep time and all the little rituals I'd built around keeping Larry happy, but the words died in my throat. Because when she put it like that, it sounded crazy, like I was afraid of my own boyfriend. Which I was, I realized. Not afraid he'd hit me. Larry wasn't violent. At least not physically, but afraid of his disappointment, his anger, his ability to make me feel small and stupid and wrong about everything. "I don't know," I said finally. "Would you like to get coffee? There's a place around the corner that has the best turmeric lattes in the city." I should have said no. I should have gone home and made Larry's dinner and pretended everything was fine. But something about the way Autumn asked, not demanding, not pressuring, just offering made me want to say yes to something for the first time in years. "Okay," I said, and the word felt like jumping off a cliff. The coffee shop was called The Grind, and it was exactly the kind of place Larry would have hated. Mismatched furniture, local art on the walls, a barista with purple hair and enough piercings to set off a metal detector. But it felt alive in a way that our sterile apartment never did, full of conversations and laughter and the kind of energy that comes from people actually enjoying themselves. Autumn ordered for both of us turmeric lattes with oat milk, and we found a table by the window where we could watch people walk by on the street. It was such a simple thing, sitting in a coffee shop on a Tuesday afternoon, but it felt revolutionary. Like I was breaking some rule I'd never agreed to follow. "So what kind of yoga do you teach?" Autumn asked, wrapping her hands around her mug like she was trying to warm them. "Vinyasa, mostly. Some restorative classes." I realized as I said it that I hadn't talked about my teaching in months. Larry always changed the subject when I brought up work, like it wasn't important enough to discuss. "I've been wanting to try yoga. I have this theory that I'm probably the least flexible person on the planet, but I figured everyone has to start somewhere." "Flexibility isn't really the point," I said, and then stopped, surprised by the conviction in my own voice. "I mean, it's nice when it happens, but yoga is more about awareness, about learning to be present with whatever's showing up for you in the moment, even if what's showing up is complete chaos. Especially then." She smiled, and I realized I was talking about yoga the way I used to before Larry convinced me. It was just a hobby before I started apologizing for caring about it. "What got you into it?" Autumn asked. "My grandmother, actually." The words came out before I could stop them, and suddenly I was telling her about Grandma Helen. who'd lived to be 93 and could still touch her toes the day she died, about how she'd taught me my first downward dog in her living room. When I was 12, how she'd always said that yoga wasn't about the poses, it was about coming home to yourself. She sounds amazing. She was. She left me some money when she died. For a studio, I felt my throat tighten. I was going to call at the Bell Sanctuary. She had this little meditation bell that she'd ring at the end of every practice, and the sound of it. It was like everything settling into place. What happened to the money? And there it was. The question I'd been avoiding all afternoon. I could have lied, could have said it was still in the bank, still part of my someday plans. But something about Autumn made lying feel impossible. Larry happened, I said quietly. She didn't ask for details, didn't push for explanations. She just nodded like she understood, and somehow that made it easier to keep talking. The worst part is, I let it happen. I gave him access to the account. I trusted him with everything, and he just took it. Trust isn't stupidity, Quinn. Someone betraying your trust doesn't make you weak, it makes them an asshole. It was such a simple reframe, but it knocked something loose in my chest. For months, I'd been telling myself that losing the money was my fault, that I should have been smarter, more careful, less trusting. But Autumn was right. Larry was the one who'd stolen from me. Larry was the asshole. We sat there in comfortable silence for a while, watching the street through the window. A woman walked by with a dog that looked like it was part wolf, part teddy bear. A couple argued quietly on the corner, their body language all sharp angles. And frustration. An old man fed pigeons from a bench, his movements slow and deliberate and peaceful. "Can I ask you something?" Autumn said eventually. "Sure." "When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I sat there, racking my brain, trying to remember. When was the last time I'd chosen something for myself? When was the last time I'd even known what I wanted? "I don't know," I said finally, and my voice sounded small even to me. "That's what I thought." She leaned forward, her dark eyes serious. "Quinn, can I tell you something? You seem like you're disappearing, like you're there but not there, you know? And I don't think that's who you actually are." "How would you know who I actually am? We just met because of the way you talk about yoga. Because you cried over that ugly lamp. Because when you told me about your grandmother, your whole face lit up." She paused, studying my expression. "Also because you're here right now instead of going home to make dinner for someone who steals from you." The words hung between us like a challenge. I wanted to defend Larry, to explain that he wasn't that bad, that he was just going through a rough patch. But the defense wouldn't come. All I could think about was the bank statement, the fear in his voice when those men came to Theodore, the way he'd looked at me like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. "I should probably go," I said, but I didn't move. "Should you?" There it was again, that gentle question that somehow managed to stop me in my tracks. "It's getting late." "It's 4:30. I know, but what?" I opened my mouth to list all the reasons I needed to leave, all the things I needed to do to keep Larry happy, to keep my life running smoothly. But as I sat there, looking at Autumn across the table, I realized something that made my chest tight with panic. I didn't want to go home. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt that way about anything, a clear, undeniable want. But sitting in that coffee shop with this woman who looked at me like I was worth listening to, I wanted to stay. I wanted to keep talking. I wanted to find out what it felt like to spend an entire afternoon doing something just because it made me happy. "I don't want to go home," I said, and the admission felt like stepping off a ledge. Autumn's smile was soft, understanding. "Then don't." Such simple words, such an impossible suggestion. But as she said it, I felt something shift inside me, some tiny rebellion sparking to life. Maybe I didn't have to go home. Maybe I could stay here a little longer, could choose what I wanted for once instead of what was expected of me. Okay, I said, and it felt like the first real decision I'd made in years. We stayed until the coffee shop closed, talking about everything and nothing. Autumn told me about her job at a nonprofit that helped women start small businesses, about the art classes she taught on weekends, about her apartment that was small but entirely hers. I told her about the yoga teacher training I'd done in Costa Rica, about the book of poetry I'd started writing in college but never finished, about all the dreams I'd put on hold without really meaning to. When we finally left, the sun was setting, and the street was full of golden light that made everything look like it was glowing. I felt lighter than I had in months, like some weight I'd been carrying had been set down. "Can I see you again?" Autumn asked as we stood outside the coffee shop. "I'd like that," I said, and meant it. "Tomorrow? Same time?" I thought about Larry's schedule, about the dinner I hadn't made, about all the ways this simple plan would complicate my life. Then I thought about the way Autumn listened, really listened, when I talked. The way she made me feel like I was worth paying attention to. "Yes," I said. Walking back to my car, I felt like I was floating. For one afternoon, I'd remembered what it felt like to be myself. Not Larry's girlfriend, not the yoga teacher who had to perform happiness for her students, just Quinn, just me. Of course, it couldn't last. Larry was waiting when I got home, sitting at the kitchen table with his arms crossed and that expression on his face that I'd learned to dread. The one that meant I'd done something wrong, broken some rule I didn't know existed. "Where were you?" he asked without looking up. "Shopping." It wasn't technically a lie. I had stopped at the grocery store on the way home, bought ingredients for a dinner I was now 2 hours late making. For 4 hours? My heart hammered against my ribs. Had he been tracking my time? Had he called the store? I ran into someone from my yoga class. "We got coffee?" "Who?" The question was sharp, demanding. I thought about Autumn, about the way she looked at me like I was worth listening to, and something protective rose up in my chest. I didn't want Larry's suspicion touching her, didn't want his jealousy poisoning what had felt so clean and good. "Sarah," I lied. "Sarah from the Tuesday morning class." He seemed to accept this, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "Well, next time call." I was worried. But he hadn't been worried. I could tell by the way he said it, flat and rehearsed. He'd been angry that I'd been gone, angry that I'd made choices without checking with him first. The worry was just the socially acceptable way to express that anger. "I'm sorry," I said automatically, the apology falling from my lips like it always did. "I'll make dinner now. Don't bother." I ordered pizza. There was punishment in his tone, a petulance that made me feel like I was dealing with a child rather than a grown man. But I just nodded and went to change clothes, grateful that I wouldn't have to spend the evening cooking and pretending everything was normal. That night, lying in bed while Larry snored beside me, I stared at the ceiling and replayed every moment of my afternoon with Autumn, the way she'd asked about my story, the way she'd listened without trying to fix me, the way she'd made me feel like maybe I wasn't crazy for wanting more than this. I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said about doing things just because I wanted to. When was the last time? I honestly couldn't remember. Every choice I made was filtered through Larry's preferences, his moods, his needs. What would he think? How would he react? What would make him happy? But today, for a few hours, I'd chosen something for myself. And the world hadn't ended. Larry was annoyed, but he was often annoyed. Nothing catastrophic had happened. I'd just been myself for a while. The next day, I found myself watching the clock during my morning yoga class, counting down the hours until I could see Autumn again. My students must have noticed something different because several of them commented on my energy, said I seemed more present than usual. One woman, Janet, who'd been coming to my classes for 2 years, lingered after everyone else had left. Quinn, honey, you seem different today. Lighter. I hope you don't mind me saying, different how? I don't know. Exactly. But whatever you're doing, keep doing it. You were radiant today. Radiant. When was the last time anyone had called me radiant? When was the last time I'd felt like I deserved the word? I met Autumn at the grind again, and this time she was waiting with 2 turmeric lattes already ordered. The sight of her sitting by, the window bathed in afternoon light, made something flutter in my chest that I didn't want to examine too closely. How was your evening? She asked as I sat down. Fine, I said automatically, then caught myself. Actually, not fine. Larry was upset that I was gone so long. Upset how? Just he likes to know where I am. It's not a big deal. Autumn was quiet for a moment, stirring her latte with a wooden stick. Can I ask you something, and you can tell me to mind my own business if you want? Okay. Do you like having to account for every hour of your day? The question was so direct, so cutting, that I felt my defenses rise immediately. It's not like that. He just worries. Does he account for his time to you? I opened my mouth to say yes, then closed it. Because the truth was, Larry's schedule was a mystery to me. His poker games that sometimes lasted until 3 in the morning, his business meetings that he never explained, his trips to see clients whose names I never learned. I knew where he said he was going, but I never questioned it, never demanded. Proof or explanations? That's different, I said weakly. Is it? We sat in silence for a while, and I felt something uncomfortable shifting in my chest. For 3 years, I told myself that Larry's need to know where I was came from love, from care. But sitting across from Autumn, being asked these simple, direct questions, I was starting to see it differently. I don't want to talk about Larry, I said finally. Okay, what do you want to talk about? Another impossible question. What did I want to talk about? What did I care about? What made me curious or excited or passionate? I don't know, I admitted. I feel like I've forgotten how to want things. Then let's practice. Right now, in this moment, what sounds good to you? I looked around the coffee shop at the art on the walls, at the people laughing and talking and living their lives. I want to know about you, I said, surprised by my own boldness. I want to know your story. Autumn's smile was soft, pleased. What do you want to know? Everything. Where you grew up, what you wanted to be when you were little, why you moved. Here, all of it, so she told me. About growing up in a small town in Oregon where everyone knew everyone else's business. About her parents, who were still married after 35 years and still held hands while they watched TV. About her younger brother who was serving in the Peace Corps in Guatemala. About how she'd moved to the city 5 years ago with nothing but a suitcase and a vague idea that she wanted to help people. What about your love life? I asked, then immediately felt my face burn. Sorry, that's none of my business. It's okay. I was with someone for about 2 years, but we broke up last spring. She wanted different things than I did. The pronoun hit me like a small electric shock, not unpleasant, but definitely surprising. I'd assumed Autumn was straight, though now that I thought about it, I wasn't sure why. Maybe because she felt safe to me in a way that felt different from my friendships with other women. What kind of different things? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. She wanted to get married, have kids, buy a house in the suburbs. The whole traditional thing. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it just wasn't what I wanted. I like my life small and simple. I like being able to travel, to take risks, to change my mind about things. That sounds nice, I said, and realized I meant it. When was the last time I've been able to change my mind about anything? What about you? Have you always known you wanted to be with men? The question was asked so casually, like it was perfectly normal to wonder about such things. But it hit me like a lightning bolt, opening up possibilities I'd never let myself consider. I don't know, I said finally. I've only ever dated men. I mean, I've had close friendships with women, but I never thought, I never considered. There's no rush to figure it out, Autumn said gently. I just think it's interesting how we sometimes limit ourselves without realizing we're doing it. That night, I lay awake thinking about her words, about limitations I'd accepted without question, about the difference between choosing something and simply never considering the alternatives. I thought about the way Autumn looked at me, really looked at me, like she was seeing something worth paying attention to. I thought about how comfortable I felt with her, how easy it was to talk and laugh and just be myself. I thought about the flutter I'd felt in my chest when I saw her waiting for me at the coffee shop. Was this what attraction felt like? This warm, buzzing awareness? This desire to spend more time with someone, to know everything about them, to make them smile? I'd been with Larry for 3 years, but I couldn't remember ever feeling this way. About him. Comfortable, yes. Familiar, definitely. But this feeling like my whole body was waking up from a long sleep, I'd never experienced anything like it. Over the next few weeks, Autumn and I fell into a routine. Coffee every Tuesday at the grind, long walks through the city on Saturdays when Larry was at the track, trips to bookstores and art galleries, and little restaurants I'd never known existed. She introduced me to her world slowly, carefully, like she was teaching me a new language. We went to a poetry reading in someone's living room, where writers I'd never heard of shared work that made my chest ache with recognition. We visited an art exhibit featuring local artists, and I found myself standing in front of a painting for 20 minutes, just letting it wash over me. What do you think? Autumn asked, appearing beside me with 2 glasses of wine from the opening night reception. I think it makes me want to cry, I said, but in a good way. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. The painting was of a woman underwater, her hair floating around her face like seaweed, her eyes closed in what might have been peace or surrender. The colors were blues and greens and purples so deep they seemed to glow from within. She looks like she's drowning, I said, or learning to breathe underwater, Autumn replied. I looked at her, surprised by the different interpretation. How do you know the difference? Her hands, Autumn said, pointing to the canvas. Look at her hands. The woman's hands were open, palms up, fingers relaxed, not grasping or fighting, but receiving, accepting. Oh, I said, and felt something shift in my understanding of the piece, of myself. We stayed until the gallery closed, wandering from room to room, talking about the art and life and everything in between. When Autumn walked me to my car, I found myself reluctant to leave, wanting to stretch the evening out just a little longer. Thank you, I said as we stood on the sidewalk outside the gallery. For what? For showing me this. For ... I don't know. For helping me remember that I like things. She smiled, and there was something in her expression that made my heart skip. Quinn, can I tell you something? Yes. I really enjoy spending time with you. More than I've enjoyed anything in a long time. The words hung between us in the cool evening air, loaded with possibility. I felt my face flush, felt that flutter in my chest again, stronger this time. I enjoy spending time with you too, I said quietly. For a moment, we just looked at each other, and I had the strangest feeling that we were standing at the edge of something important, something that would change everything if we stepped forward. But then my phone buzzed with a text from Larry. Where are you? and the spell was broken. I have to go, I said, the familiar anxiety creeping back into my voice. I know, Autumn said, but something had shifted in her expression. A sadness, maybe, or a disappointment. That night, Larry was waiting up for me again, and this time his mood was darker. Art gallery? He said when I told him where I'd been. Since when do you care about art? I've always been interested in art. You know that. No, I don't know that. In 3 years, you've never once mentioned wanting to go to an art gallery. He was right, and we both knew it. But the reason I'd never mentioned it wasn't because I wasn't interested. It was because I'd learned not to bring up things that didn't interest him. Somewhere along the way, I'd started censoring myself so automatically that I'd forgotten I was doing it. Sarah got me interested, I lied, hating myself for dragging my imaginary yoga student into this. This Sarah sounds like a bad influence. She's not a bad influence. She helps me remember things I used to enjoy. What's that supposed to mean? I looked at Larry, really looked at him, and saw something I'd been trying not to see for months. The way his jaw was set, the suspicion in his eyes, the possessiveness that he disguised as concern. When had he started looking at me like I was something he owned rather than someone he loved? Nothing, I said, because I was too tired to fight and too scared of what I might say if I started telling the truth. It doesn't mean anything, but it did mean something. It meant everything. And as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling while Larry slept beside me, I realized that I was standing at a crossroads. I could keep pretending that everything was fine, keep shrinking myself to fit into Larry's version of who I should be. Or I could admit that these afternoons with Autumn had shown me something I'd forgotten, what it felt like to be fully alive. The choice terrified me, but for the first time in years, I knew what I wanted. The scarf was autumn-colored burnt orange and deep red, soft as cashmere, and probably expensive. Autumn had wrapped it around my shoulders when we left the coffee shop that Thursday, when the October wind had picked up and I'd started shivering in my thin cardigan. "Keep it," she'd said when I tried to give it back. "It looks better on you." Anyway, I should have left it in my car. Should have hidden it somewhere Larry wouldn't find it. But I'd worn it into the apartment because it smelled like her perfume, something woody and warm that made me feel calm, and for just a few minutes, I wanted to carry that feeling with me into my real life. Larry found it when he was going through my bag, looking for gum. Such a small thing, such an innocent discovery, but the way his face changed when he pulled out that scarf. I knew immediately that everything was about to fall apart. "What's this?" he asked, holding it up like it was evidence of a crime. "A scarf." I kept my voice level, casual, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. "I can see it's a scarf." "Quinn, whose scarf?" I could have lied. Could have said I'd bought it, found it, borrowed it from some fictional friend. But something about the way he was holding it, the accusation already forming in his eyes, made me tired of lying. "Sarah's," I said, sticking with the name I'd been using for weeks. "Sarah gave you an expensive scarf? It was cold. She let me borrow it." Larry's eyes narrowed, and I watched him turn the scarf over in his hands, examining it like he was looking for clues. "This is cashmere, Quinn. This probably costs more than you make in a week." So what kind of yoga student can afford to give away cashmere scarves? What does this Sarah do for work? The questions came rapid fire, and I realized with growing panic that I didn't have answers. Because Sarah didn't exist, and the real person who'd given me the scarf worked for a nonprofit and lived in a studio apartment and probably couldn't afford cashmere any more than I could. "I don't know," I said. "We don't really talk about work." "You don't talk about work, but she's giving you expensive gifts?" "It's not a gift, it's a loan." "Really? Because you've been borrowing this scarf for 3 days? Had it really been 3 days? I tried to remember, but the weeks had started to blur together. Coffee dates and conversations and moments of feeling like myself again, all blending into something that felt more real than the life I was living at home. I forgot to give it back. Larry threw the scarf down on the kitchen table, and something in the gesture, the violence of it, the dismissal made my chest tight with anger. You forgot, he repeated. You forgot to return a several $100 scarf to someone you barely know. I do know her. We've been friends for how long, Quinn? How long have you been friends with this mysterious Sarah who gives away expensive scarves and takes you to art galleries and coffee shops every week? The way he said it with that mocking tone made everything sound sordid and suspicious. But it wasn't. What I had with Autumn was the cleanest, most honest thing in my life. It was the only thing that made me feel like myself. A few weeks, I said quietly. A few weeks. He nodded like I'd confirmed something he'd suspected all along. And in these few weeks, you've become so close that she's giving you her clothes. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Quinn? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're lying to me. It looks like you're sneaking around behind my back. I'm not sneaking around. I told you I was with Sarah. You told me you ran into Sarah from your yoga class. You didn't tell me you were having some kind of emotional affair with a woman I've never met. Emotional affair. The words hit me like a slap, not because they were untrue, but because they were too true. Because whatever was happening between Autumn and me felt more intimate than anything I'd shared with Larry in months. Because I looked forward to seeing her more than I looked forward to coming home. Because when I was with her, I felt like the person I was supposed to be. It's not an affair, I said, but my voice sounded weak even to me, isn't it? You're spending hours with another person, telling them things you don't tell me, accepting gifts, lying about where you've been. What would you call it? I opened my mouth to argue, but the words wouldn't come, because he was right, in a way. I had been lying. I had been sharing things with Autumn that I didn't share with him. I had been living a secret life, even if that life was just coffee and conversation and the revolutionary act of being myself for a few hours at a time. I would call it friendship, I said finally. Bullshit. The word came out sharp and ugly, and I flinched. Friends don't lie to their partners about where they're going and what they're doing. Friends don't give each other expensive presents. Friends don't make their partners feel like shit for asking basic questions. I never said you were making me feel like shit. You didn't have to say it. I can see it on your face every time I ask you where you've been. Like I'm some kind of monster for wanting to know what my girlfriend is up to. There it was, the thing that had been building between us for weeks, maybe longer. The way every conversation had become a negotiation, every question a trap, every answer insufficient. I was tired of it. Tired of walking on eggshells. Tired of apologizing for having a life outside of our relationship. Tired of feeling guilty for wanting things he couldn't give me. Maybe the problem isn't my friendship with Sarah, I said, and I could hear my voice getting stronger, more certain. Maybe the problem is that you don't trust me. My sister Kate lived in a tiny apartment across town, the kind of place that could generously be called cozy and more accurately described as cramped. But when I showed up on her doorstep at 9 o'clock that night with a suitcase and tear-stained cheeks, she didn't ask questions. She just pulled me inside, made tea, and waited for me to explain. Kate was 2 years older than me and had always been the strong one, the decisive one, the sister who knew what she wanted and went after it. She worked as a physical therapist, had been married to her college boyfriend for 5 years, and had the kind of life that looked perfect from the outside. We'd grown apart since I'd been with Larry, partly because he didn't like her, said she was judgmental, and partly because being around her made me uncomfortably aware of how much I'd compromised. So she said, after I'd finished explaining about Larry and the money and my need for space, "Who's Sarah?" I nearly choked on my tea. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you've mentioned this Sarah person 5 times in the last 10 minutes, and you get this look on your face every time you say her name. So who's she?" Leave it to Kate to cut straight to the heart of things. I set down my mug and stared into the amber liquid, trying to figure out how to explain something I didn't fully understand myself. "She's a friend, someone I met at the vintage store, and what, Quinn?" Kate's voice was gentle but firm. "I haven't seen you this animated in years. You're sitting straighter, your voice is stronger, and you keep touching that scarf like it's some kind of talisman. So I'll ask again, who's she?" I looked down at the scarf, which I had indeed been unconsciously stroking while we talked. It still smelled like Autumn's perfume, still held the warmth of her kindness. "Her name is Autumn," I said quietly. "And I think I might be in love with her." The words hung in the air between us, and I waited for Kate's reaction. Shock, maybe. Confusion. Questions about when I realized I was attracted to women. How long I'd been hiding this part of myself. Instead, she just nodded. "Does she know?" "Does she know what?" "That you're in love with her?" I stopped. Realized I hadn't even admitted it to myself until this moment. I don't know, maybe I think she might feel the same way, but I'm not sure. "What makes you think she might?" I thought about all the small moments that had added up to something bigger. The way Autumn looked at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. The way she'd given me the scarf, told me it looked better on me. The way she'd asked if I'd always known I wanted to be with men, like she was opening a door for exploration. "She sees me," I said finally. "Like, really sees me? Not who she wants me to be or who she thinks I should be. Just me. And when I'm with her, I feel like the person I'm supposed to be." Kate smiled, and there was something sad and knowing in her expression. "Quinn, can I tell you something?" "Yeah, I never liked Larry." The statement was so direct, so matter-of-fact, but I laughed despite everything. "I know. You made that pretty clear. No, I don't think you understand. I didn't just dislike Larry as a person, though I did. I disliked what he did to you. Over the 3 years you were with him, I watched my sister disappear. You stopped calling as much, stopped sharing your opinions about things, stopped, I don't know, taking up space in your own life. You never said anything. I tried a few times. But you always defended him, made excuses. And I figured you had to figure it out for yourself. Did you know? About me being about me possibly being attracted to women." Kate was quiet for a moment, considering. "I wondered sometimes. You never seemed that excited about the guys you dated, even Larry, but I thought maybe you were just, I don't know, particular. It never occurred to me that you might be looking in the wrong direction entirely." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping our tea and processing everything that had changed in the course of a single evening. Finally, Kate spoke again. "So, what are you going to do?" "About what?" "About Autumn, about Larry, about your life." Such big questions. A few hours ago, I'd had answers to all of them, or at least I thought I did. Now everything felt uncertain, full of possibility and terror in equal measure. "I don't know," I said. "I guess I need to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be what someone else wants." That sounds like a good place to start. That night, lying on Kate's fold-out couch and staring at the ceiling, I let myself think about Autumn without guilt for the first time. I thought about her laugh, warm and genuine. I thought about the way she listened, really listened, when I talked. I thought about the flutter in my chest when I saw her, the way time seemed to slow down when we were together. Was this what it felt like to be attracted to a woman? This soft, warm pulling sensation? This desire to know everything about someone, to share everything with them? I'd spent so many years thinking attraction had to be urgent and desperate, the way it was portrayed in movies. But this felt different, deeper, like coming home to myself. I must have fallen asleep thinking about her, because I woke up the next morning with her name on my lips and a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I was going to tell her how I felt. The decision terrified me, but it also felt inevitable. I'd spent 3 years shrinking myself to fit into Larry's life, and where had it gotten me? Broke, heartbroken, and so lost I'd forgotten what I wanted. I didn't want to make that mistake again. I didn't want to let fear keep me from exploring something that might be beautiful. I called in sick to work and spent the morning walking around Kate's neighborhood, trying to figure out what I was going to say. How do you tell someone you think you might be falling in love with them? How do you explain that they've helped you remember who you are? By the time I met Autumn at the grind that afternoon, I was a bundle of nerves. She took one look at me and frowned with concern. "Quinn, what's wrong? You look like you haven't slept." "I left Larry," I blurted out, then immediately felt my face burn. We had a fight about the scarf, actually. And some other things. I'm staying at my sister's for a while. Autumn set down her coffee cup, her expression serious. "I'm sorry." That must have been difficult. It was. But also, I paused, trying to find the right words. Also kind of liberating. How so? "He wanted me to stop seeing you. He said our friendship was inappropriate, that I was having some kind of emotional affair." Something flickered across Autumn's face, hurt maybe, or disappointment. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him he was wrong." "That what we have is friendship? Is it?" The question was quiet, almost whispered, but it hit me like a thunderbolt. I looked at her across the table, at her dark eyes and the way she was watching me, and I realized she was asking me to be honest, really honest, about what I felt. What? I wanted what this thing between us actually was. "I don't know," I said finally. I've never been with a woman before. I don't know if what I'm feeling is friendship or something else. What are you feeling?" Such a simple question. Such a complicated answer. "I'm feeling like I want to spend all my time with you," I said slowly. "I'm feeling like you're the first person in years who's really seen me and liked what you found. I'm feeling like when I'm with you, I remember who I used to be before I started apologizing for taking up space." Autumn was very still, very quiet, waiting. "And I'm feeling scared," I continued, "because I don't know what any of this means. I don't know if you see me as just a friend or something more. I don't know if I'm reading signals that aren't there. I don't know anything except that losing you would feel like losing myself all over again." For a moment, we just looked at each other across the table. The coffee shop buzzed with conversation around us, but it felt like we were in our own bubble, separate from the rest of the world. Then Autumn reached across the table and took my hand. "Quinn," she said softly, "I've been waiting for you to figure out what you were feeling. I've been hoping you would." "Really? Really?" "I've been attracted to you since that first day in the vintage store. That you were with someone and you seemed so uncertain about everything. I didn't want to push. I was uncertain. I am uncertain. But I'm also—" I paused, took a breath, decided to be brave. "I'm also pretty sure I'm falling in love with you." Autumn's smile was radiant, transformative. "I'm pretty sure I'm falling in love with you too." The words hung between us like a bridge, like a promise. I felt tears prick my eyes, not sad tears, but tears of relief and joy and something that felt like coming alive. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now we figure it out together," Autumn said, squeezing my hand. "No pressure, no expectations, just ... Let's see where this goes. I nodded, feeling lighter than I had in years. For the first time in my adult life, I was choosing something just for me. Not because it was safe or expected or guaranteed to work out, but because it felt right. Because it felt like coming home to myself. Can I kiss you? I asked, and the boldness of the question surprised us both. Here? Autumn glanced around the busy coffee shop. Maybe not here, I said, laughing. But soon? Very soon, she promised. The kiss happened 2 hours later, in the parking lot behind the grind. Autumn had suggested we go for a walk, and somehow we'd ended up leaning against her car, talking about everything and nothing, the October air crisp and full of possibility. When she leaned in and brushed her lips against mine, it was nothing like kissing Larry. There was no urgency, no demand. Just softness and warmth and the sense that we had all the time in the world. Wow, I whispered when we broke apart. Good. Wow or bad wow. Very good wow. She smiled and kissed me again, longer this time, and I felt something click into place inside me. Like a puzzle piece I'd been trying to force into the wrong spot, finally finding where it belonged. Over the next few weeks, Autumn and I moved slowly, carefully. She understood that I was figuring out not just my feelings for her, but my sexuality, my identity, who I was when I wasn't trying to be someone else's version of perfect. She never pushed, never demanded answers I wasn't ready to give. We went on dates that didn't feel like dates, art galleries and bookstore readings and long walks through the city. We talked about everything, our childhoods, our dreams, our fears about the future. She told me about coming out to her parents when she was 22, about the girlfriend who'd wanted the suburban life, about her work helping women start small businesses. I told her about my grandmother, about the yoga studio I still dreamed of opening, about the poetry I'd stopped writing when Larry convinced me it was silly. She listened to all of it like it mattered, because to her, it did. Larry tried to contact me several times during those weeks. Texts that ranged from apologetic to angry to pleading. He wanted to meet for coffee, to talk things through, to work on our relationship. Each message felt like an echo from a life I'd already left behind. Kate was incredible through all of it. She gave me space when I needed it and advice when I asked for it, and she never once made me feel like I was imposing or confused or making a mistake. One evening, about 3 weeks after I'd left Larry, she found me on her couch reading a book of poetry Autumn had recommended. You look happy, she observed, settling beside me with her own book. I am happy, I think. Is that weird? Weird how? I just left a 3-year relationship. Shouldn't I be devastated? Shouldn't I be mourning what I lost? Kate was quiet for a moment, considering. What did you lose, exactly? The question stopped me short. What had I lost? The apartment that never felt like home. The relationship where I had to apologize for having opinions. The version of myself that was so small and accommodating that I'd forgotten I had needs. I don't know, I said finally. Maybe I didn't lose anything. Maybe I just ... found something. Maybe you found yourself. That night, I called Autumn and asked if she wanted to come over. Kate was working late, and I was ready to be alone with her, really alone, without the buffer of public spaces and other people's conversations. She arrived with takeout Thai food and a bottle of wine, and we spread everything out on Kate's coffee. Table like a picnic. We talked and laughed and kissed on the couch like teenagers, and when she asked if I was sure about this about us, about exploring this part of myself, I didn't hesitate. I've never been more sure of anything, I told her. Making love with Autumn was a revelation, not just because she was a woman, though that was part of it, but because she approached my body like it was something precious, something worthy of attention and care. Because she asked what I liked, what I wanted, what felt good. because she seemed to understand that pleasure was something we created together, not something one person took from another. Afterward, lying in Kate's narrow bed with Autumn's head on my chest, I felt like I was finally inhabiting my own skin. "How are you feeling?" she asked softly. "Like I've been holding my breath for 3 years and I can finally exhale." She lifted her head to look at me, her dark eyes serious. "No regrets? About this? About us? Never? About Larry? About the life you're leaving behind?" I considered the question honestly. Was there anything about my life with Larry that I missed? The security of routine, maybe? The certainty of knowing what was expected of me. But those weren't the foundations of a life worth living. "I regret the time I wasted," I said finally. "I regret how small I made myself. But I don't regret leaving, and I definitely don't regret finding you." Autumn smiled and settled back against my chest. "I'm glad you found." "Me too,"